All right, ladies and gentlemen, good morning and welcome to Kabbalah Café. This is our look at all things Kabbalistic. Today we have a phenomenal conversation all about the days of the week. So the premise of today's session is that every day possesses an energy. Every day possesses an energy, i.e. a sefirot that is associated with the day. Now, how many sefirot are there? 10. But how many emotional sefirot are there? 7. Right? Because of the 10, you have 3 intellectual, you have 7 emotional. And so Kabbalah says, the 7 emotional, what else do you know about the 7? 7 correspond to the days of the week. Check out the brand new coffee machine that we got. Thank you very much. I actually got another one, but we're piloting this one to make sure that it works for everybody's use. Okay, so.
And the good coffee's in the ark.
Yeah, well, we break that out for special occasions. So so here's how I want to frame this. The verse says, there's a very interesting verse. The verse, and it's in the Kiddush, which is like the blessing over the wine that we say on Shabbat day, after the prayer service, after the morning service and the Musaf, then we do Kiddush, and then we have a lunch. Yesterday, by the way, were you here yesterday?
I didn't stay for Kiddush.
Got it. It was a 4th of July themed, hot dogs. I actually loved it. It's fantastic. I preferred it over the stuff that kind of becomes, usual. Anyway, back to the story. So the Kiddush, so part of the phrase of the Kiddush, which means sanctification, but that's the blessing that we make over the Shabbat, we do one Friday night, we do one Shabbat day, and then of course we do another version of that called Havdalah to conclude the Shabbat. We say, Ki Sheshet Yamim, Asa Hashem et Hashamayim ve'et ha'aretz, because 6 days God made heaven and earth. Now, the mystics point out, and again, this nuance works in the Hebrew and the English, I'll do my best. It doesn't say, Be Sheshet Yamim. Who knows Hebrew?
It didn't say in.
Be, so the prefix of the letter bet, Be always means in. Be Sheshet Yamim would mean that in 6 days God created heaven and earth. It doesn't say in 6 days. It says 6 days God created heaven and earth, which grammatically doesn't make sense. 6 days God created heaven and earth. In 6 days, God took 6 days to create heaven and earth. It means 6 days God created heaven and earth. So the mystics say there's an alternative reading. And that is, that, and I mentioned this I think maybe last week or 2 weeks ago. I alluded to it, but today we're going to do a deep dive in this. That it's not just that God created space within the framework of time, because those are, of course, are the 2 dimensions. It's not like God created things in a framework of time called days, but it's rather that God created 6 energies, and really 7, because of course Shabbat is also an energy. God created energies with which to create the 6 and 7 days of creation. Meaning it's not in 6 days God created, but God actually creates the very energies of the 6 days. Not just the stuff of the 6 days, but the energies that will give rise to the 6 days. Now, in case that's confusing, well, then mission accomplished. I'm kidding. In case that's confusing, again, I'm going to bring it back to the sefirot and try to make it a little bit more understandable. And the way I'm going to do that is by saying the following. Kabbalah speaks extensively of 10 energies, 10 sefirot, 10 divine powers that you and I have mirrored in our soul. In fact, that's one of the reasons, or one of the explanations as to what it means that you and I are created in the divine image. Right? Torah says, and this is straight up, Bible. The Bible says, God created Adam, God created the human being in his image. In the image of God, he created them. That's what it says. God created the human being in his image. And everyone asks, what does it mean in his image? And there are many different answers that are given. What kind of image does an imageless God have? We don't believe in a God that has an image. We believe in a God that possesses no image. God that doesn't have a body, not the form of a body, not any bodily functions, etc. God doesn't have an eye that sees and an ear that hears. God is transcendent beyond all physical, literal physical parameters and expressions. So what does it mean that we're created in the divine image? We have a body, we have a physical form, we very much have an image. So how does it mean? What does it mean that you and I are created in the image of an imageless God? And Kabbalah answers. One of the answers that's given is that it's not referring to God's essence, it's referring to God's manifestation within the 10 sefirot. Just like God emanates these 10 faculties or attributes or powers or whatever you want to call them to create the world with, so too he imprinted them on the human soul. Every entity we know in Kabbalah, we've said this many times, everything that exists has a soul. An animal has a soul, a tree has a soul, a rock has a soul, even a rock has a soul, says the Ari Sollish. Even an Evan Domain, even a still silent rock, possesses a soul. But the human soul is very unique. Why? In the image of God. Just like God manifests 10 attributes, you and I also possess the very same 10 attributes. Of course, on a human level as opposed to a divine level, so God's attributes are perfect and pure. Ours can get a little bit complicated. So like, for example, when it comes to chesed, which is love or kindness. So God's love is perfect and pure. Our love, it can get messy. Meaning we can sometimes love the right things in the right way, and sometimes we might not love the right things in the right way. We might have a love for things that are maybe not so healthy for us, etc. And the same is true with all of the attributes. The point is, though, that we all have these 10 abilities, 10 powers. 3, as I mentioned before, 3 of them are intellectual, chachma, bina, and dat, which the acronym of which is Chabad, right? Wisdom, understanding, and knowledge. And then we have the 7 emotional attributes. And Kabbalah says that every single day, God didn't just create stuff, God manifested an energy, and around that energy, the day of creation was formed. Meaning, the things that were created on each of the days of creation reflect the energy that God manifested into that very creation. So, to find out more about what happened each day and what the energy of each day is, I have a handout. I have a copy. So please take and pass. Please take and pass the copy.
Rabbi, is that true that everything that was created, the energy was created before the thing?
Huh?
Is it true of everything that was created, the energy was created before the thing was created?
Oh, everything always emanates from the spiritual reality, and therefore you're always going to find this type of process where you have energy and then you have creation. Now let's jump in. So this is Kabbalah Café, creation, redemption. Okay, 7 days of creation, 7 sefirot. We're going to begin with day 1, Chesed. Give me a moment. I'm going to share this online. All right, here we go. Day 1, Chesed. Let's go. So I don't have a chart, but we have this, which should suffice, because it lists the 7 emotional energies known as the 7 midot, or lower sefirot. Here we go. Day 1, Chesed. The word Chesed means kindness or benevolence. It denotes the unbounded loving kindness with which God created the worlds and with which all of creation is permeated, as the verse states, Olam Chesed Yibaneh. The world was built with Chesed, and that is a quote from Psalms chapter 89. So let's slow that down for a second, and let's pause and even meditate a little bit on this. The idea here is, and this is a huge idea, God created, everyone wonders, why are we here? Why did God create the world? And what Kabbalah teaches is that at the core of it is God wanting to be kind. God wished to perform kindness. And you know what you need if you want to do kindness? Someone else. You need an other upon which to bestow kindness. Let's say you want to, help out, you want to give, you want to be generous, whatever it is. You need something or someone with which to do kindness. So that's what it means. So Chesed is really the driver of all of creation. God wished to act in a way of kindness, and thus God created the world. Let's continue second paragraph of day 1. Kabbalah explains that kindness was, in fact, the reason for the creation. Since God's nature is absolute benevolence and loving kindness, He created the worlds so that He would have upon whom to bestow His kindness. As is written in Eitz Chaim, and that's classic work of Kabbalah, penned by Rabbi Chaim Vital, the primary student of the Arizal. It is the nature of he who is good to do good. So again, let's pause on that line. And the Hebrew is Teva Hatov Lehetiv. The nature of goodness is to do good things. Meaning if you're good by nature, you're going to want to do good things. You don't want to just keep it inside. So God is the ultimate of good. God is the epitome of good. So what does God want to do? He wants to do goodness. He's good, he wants to do goodness. And that's what creation, that's what kind of drives creation. Let's continue. So how does this manifest in what happened on day one? So Kabbalah says, light was created on the first day. Light is revelation, as explained previously. Okay, we don't have the previous, where this is lifted from, we don't have the previous text, but light is revelation. This light, the light that was created on the first day, was infinite. As our sages say, the light that was created on the first day shone from one end of creation to the other. Or in the language of Kabbalah, in the beginning, an infinite, uncompounded light filled all of creation. This is the light of Chesed, which permeates all of creation and through which all of creation is built. Very important to understand what light means in this context. Do you know when the sun, moon, and stars were created? What day were the sun? Day 4 is correct. Day 4 is correct. But sorry, you needed to frame that in the form of a question. What is day 4? Joking. Day 4, sun, moon, and stars are created. So the question, which begs the question, what was created on day number 1? Is it light? God created light on day 1. What kind of light? There was no sun. What kind of light are we talking about here? So Kabbalah explains, and other commentators also give, their shot of explanation, that light here is not just a physical light. There was no sun yet. It was a spiritual light that literally shone from one end of creation to the other. Now, you and I can't fathom what that looks like. But imagine a light and a love and a clarity and a brilliance and a beauty that is just unbounding, infinite, endless, and just perfect. That is the feeling, that is the energy of day 1. Day 1 of creation is when you feel the intimate and close love, the pure love of the Creator to creation. You feel that creation only exists due to the love of the Creator. It's not like, well, creation exists, and now the question is, well, how should I treat the things that I created? The only reason why there's creation is because of love. The whole thing is predicated on love. The only reason, according to Kabbalah, according to what we just said, why God created is because Teva Hatov Lehetiv, is because the nature of the one who is good is to do good things. And God wanted to do something good. So what did he do? He created life. Can you imagine any greater act of kindness than giving life and giving beauty and giving? So God's creation, day 1, evokes chesed and pure kindness. And I got to explain. There's different forms of kindness. There's a form of kindness that comes as a result of someone doing something nice to you. So someone does something nice to you. So in response, you do something nice to them or for them. But that's a transactional chesed. That's a transactional kindness. What we're talking about is an unprovoked, uninitiated, uninstigated, pure expression, unilateral expression of love from God to us, before which we didn't even exist. It's not like we earned God's love because we weren't even here. We're talking about the energy that spawns, that spurs God to create in the first place. That was completely self-initiated because of God's own love for what he projected us to be. God wanted to grant something the power of life itself. I hope that's making sense. All right, and that's the light. That's the light of day 1. It's not a physical light. It's a light that is tied into this idea, this concept of love. In other places in Kabbalah, it frames it in the context of a relationship. God wanted a relationship. And obviously, if you want a relationship, you need an other. You could be in a relationship with, there's always how you relate to self, but that's not exactly what it means. God however much we understand about God, certainly had a relationship with himself, whatever that means. But God wanted a relationship with an other, and that implies another. You can't have a relationship with another without another, and so God creates the world to bestow kindness, to be in a relationship, and to express that love. Chesed is the building block of creation. Chesed is the building block of any relationship. It's got to be predicated on that love, on that boundless love and energy. Now, do you need other elements? Absolutely. That's why the world wasn't created in one day. Nor was Rome, by the way, created in one day, according to the popular idiom. But God didn't create the world in just one day. He created it, it unfolded in 7 days, because all seven, as we'll see, all seven attributes, divine attributes, are required for the fabric of existence to be sustained. All right, let's jump back in.
It still exists, right, from the first day?
That light was hidden for the future time, the Messianic era.
But the energy exists of the love, of the creation.
Yeah. The concept of that love. Now, do we see it? Do we feel it? No, we can learn about it. And if we meditate on it, we might be able to feel it. Meaning we can try to tap into that and recognize that, yes, this whole, the foundation of this reality is God's kindness, and without which we wouldn't even have begun to exist, etc. So we can tap into that. But it's not as obviously on display as it was in the beginning. Now let's do day number 2. Now, by the way, I should mention that because of these energies that are shining on these days, when you and I relive those days, meaning every Sunday, every Monday, every Tuesday, it's easier to tap into that specific energy on that specific day. So let me just pause for a moment and explain what I mean by that. God employs all 7 energies, almost like different paints on a paint colors on a palette, or different pieces of fabric in knitting. I don't know. I'm out of my league. Although I did hear tell a great knitting joke the other week, I think, or maybe it was printed in the bulletin. I don't remember. It's fantastic. This woman is speeding down the highway knitting. Cop pulls alongside and says, "Pull over." And she says, "No, it's a cardigan." Pull over, cardigan. Yeah. All right. Sweater. There you go. Back to the story, back to Kabbalah. Let's go away from comedy. Kabbalah and comedy. Who knew? Who actually knew? Back to the story.
Define comedy, sir.
Yes, define comedy. Very, very liberal use of the word comedy. So, although God employs, we're after the we're post 7 days of creation, which means that we have all 7 energies are, interwoven in the fabric of existence, and we have all 7 in our souls. But every day, as a callback almost to what happened the initial first week of creation, you can tap more into that energy. So today is Sunday. Today is Yom Rishon. Today is day number 1. And it harkens back to that first day of creation, which means you and I can tap into the chesed energy much stronger. People are in a good mood on Sunday, typically. I can't say everybody. I mean, what do I know? And there is this thing called the Sunday scaries that I've noticed recently people talking about. But that's, I think, kind of thinking about what Monday holds, because we'll see Monday is Gevura, which is a completely different energy. But Sunday is chesed. All 7 are accessible, all 7 days of the week, etc. But every day, there's a little bit more accessible, that original energy. So let's move on to day number 2. Day number 2 is Gevura. Gevura means limitation, Gevura means withholding, Gevura means strictness, Gevura means judgment. Let's see how it's defined in the context of creation. Day 2, Gevura. Since the infinite and unlimited chesed of God is intended for finite creatures unable to absorb infinite kindness and yet remain in physical existence, meaning, God wants to give infinite love, but we can't receive infinite love because we're finite creatures. So what does that look like? It's an incompatible gift. So because of that, the attribute of chesed is controlled and limited by the aspect of gevura. Gevura means restrictive power, the power to limit and conceal the infinite light so that each creature can receive according to its capacity. So that's what Gevura does. Gevura tailors the energy to the recipient's capacity. Let's continue back inside. Thus, Gevura is also an aspect of God's kindness, for if the outpouring of infinite kindness were to remain unrestricted, finite creatures would become instantly nullified in the infinite revelation of divine love. Therefore, and I'm going to give an example that I always give for this in a moment. Therefore, the sefirot of Gevura is the manifestation of God's power to restrict and conceal the light, so that his creatures can receive his loving kindness, each according to its capacity. So the example that I like to give is the one of a cup and pouring water. So imagine if you have a cup, like I have, and you want to fill it up with water. So you walk over to the sink, and you turn on the faucet, and the water goes in, and all is good. But imagine if you will for a moment, that instead of the water flowing at a normal rate, imagine if it came out like a fire hose. That's going to be too much. And then not only is it not going to fill the cup properly, it's going to create a lot of havoc and chaos. It also might, a cup like this, it might actually break the cup open. It might actually destroy the cup. And so oftentimes, when you have something that's too big for the container to receive, not only does it not enter the container or fill the container, on the contrary, it can break the container. For example, if you expose the eye to too much sunlight, not only is it not better, it's actually worse. So an infinite God who has infinite love and infinite chesed, who wants to bestow that upon creation, that is a bad recipe. Finite creation, that's a bad recipe. So God needs to employ immediately, day 2, the second energy, which is Gevura, which is the ability to cut down that infinite revelation. Let's take a look at the next paragraph. On the second day of creation, so what happened on the second day that reflects this Gevura? On the second day of creation, separation of the higher waters from the lower waters was introduced. In the Torah, this is called the rakia, the firmament. In Kabbalah, water signifies kindness, chesed. The separation of the waters means that the infinite chesed of God, referred to as the higher waters, is separated from the lower waters, signifying finite chesed, which has the ability to permeate the lower worlds. This is such a beautiful, mystical explanation. Water is chesed. Let me explain why water is chesed. First of all, water gives life, right? As kind of boisterous as that, I don't know if that's the right word, as loud and ostentatious as that storm was last night, bottom line is it gave a lot of rain, and rain helps things grow. Without rain, things don't grow. So number one, rain gives life. You can't, if you don't have water to drink, you're not going to live. So water equals life, which equals chesed. If God's chesed is manifested, if God's kindness and love is manifested by giving life, well, giving life is synonymous with water. But there's another element. The other element is, and this is explained in Tanya in a few places, that water always flows from above to below. Water, if you poke a hole at the bottom of this cup, the water will not remain content staying in the cup. The water will always flow to the lowest source. If you have a crack in a swimming pool, the water is always going to go out. Water will always seek the lowest source. If water falls on a roof, it's going to go down the roof. If it falls on a mountain slope, it's going to go down the mountain. And again, all of these things we know and are obvious. The point that I'm saying is that water flows from above to below. Well, think about God's kindness. God's kindness is also, as it were, flowing from above to below. Not that God is physically above, but it means conceptually, spiritually, higher than, whatever that means, higher than us. Infinite versus finite. God's chesed is flowing. But what happens day 2? The Torah tells us, this is straight up Genesis 1, chapter 1. The Torah tells us that God separates the upper waters and the lower waters. Meaning, in the beginning, there was only one, whatever this would look like, there was one block of water. It was just water. What happens day 2 is that God separates. God divides the upper waters from the lower waters. Kabbalistically, that means water is chesed. It means that God is saying there's a time and a place for infinite water chesed, And there's a time and a place for lower, finite water chesed. You got to know who you're dealing with. So the example that Kabbalah always gives is the example, a favorite example or analogy of Kabbalah is vis-a-vis education. When you're educating someone, teaching someone, let's talk about educating children. So you want to impart information. That's a good thing because you love, therefore you want to teach. If you didn't love, you would say you figure it out on your own. But because I love you, I want to teach you. I want to guide you. I want to mentor you. I want to share wisdom with you that you don't already have. So teaching is an act of love. At its core, it's an act of love. Could it be a job? Sure. And a relationship could also be devoid of authentic love. That's always the challenge. But teaching, imparting information is at its core an act of love. But what's the key ingredient in education? You can't just pour all your ideas on the student. Because if you did, the student might say, I have no idea what you're talking about, right? What are you talking about? I have no idea what you're saying. So what do you need to do? You need to cut it down. You need to say, there's what I know, which is on this level. And then there's my student, who's on a much lower level. It's a kid. I can't dump all the information on this kid. It's not going to work. I need to separate the upper waters from the lower waters. I need to keep, I'm not going to forget what I know. I'll keep that. But I need to create a new packet of information that is deliverable and receivable to and within the child. I'm going to separate from my understanding and create a space of understanding for this child. The truth is, it's true in every act of love. And every time you hug your kid, you hug your child, right? They're a little kid, you pick them up, you give them a hug. You hug them only so much and no more. You know why? You don't want to squeeze them too hard, right? You can't. It's going to hurt them. If you squeeze them as much as you love them, it's going to be too much. So you squeeze, but you hold back. There's chesed and there's gvura. So there's the full measure of the infinite. Of course, we're humans, so there's nothing infinite about humans. But let's just use this, in this analogy, this metaphor. So you have this love that is boundless, but the expression needs to have parameters. Right? It has to have parameters. Okay. So that's Gevurah. That's second day. That's day 2. And again, it's manifest in the separation of the higher waters from the lower waters. Make sense? Okay. Day number 3. What is day 3? Day 3 is Tiferet. Tiferet means harmony. Tiferet means beauty. So let's read what it says. The sefirot of Tiferet represents the harmonious blending of varying colors and forms, producing a work of great beauty. Now, I need to explain what that means. So, this is something that Kabbalah shares extensively. That beauty is when you take two, let's say in art, 2 colors or more, and weave them together. Blend them together. Use different colors together. Now, I gotta qualify this. You walk into a modern museum of art, or right? Isn't that MoMA, Modern Museum of Art? Or you walk into, what's the one over here? The High Museum? I don't know if they're modern. Are they modern? Sometimes mixed. All right. You check out some modern art, and sometimes you might have just one color, and it might even be called red. The whole canvas is red, and you're like, that's it? Yes, it's red. You're like, wait a second. Hold on. 1 second. Could I, a non-artist, have taken red and put it on the canvas? Yes. Would it be worth anything? No. It had to be done by that person, that artist, that master who had the vision to put the red on the thing. I got it. So modern art might not work the same way because sometimes it's not this harmonious blending of colors. Sometimes it is, sometimes it's not. Who was it? Jackson Pollock, was that him? The guy who used to throw paint? He was the paint thrower? Love that. But that is harmonious blending of colors, because not anyone can just throw color. By the way, I read an article. Oh my gosh. Okay, can we pause here for a moment? I'm going to give myself permission. Yes, you may. You ready for this? I heard an incredible story. This didn't happen recently. It probably happened 20, 30 years ago. There was this kid, this art prodigy, who was Jackson Pollocking his way around by creating these works of art, and the parents videoed it. And the videos went viral back in the day, whatever that meant. Remember America's Funniest Home Videos? That was before YouTube. Anyway, no one remembers that? You remember that? All right. AFV, I think it was America's Funniest Videos. So this kid, like probably little kid, like maybe 4, 5, 6, 7, one of those, I don't know, somewhere in that range, was, again, I don't know why I just got fireworks on the thing over here. I'm not sure what I did. But the kid is throwing paint and creating this art, and the art took off. And people were spending good money to get an original, put in kids' name, art. Until they found out that the parents were guiding the thing. And the second that happened, worthless. Garnished. Oh, the parents helped. Soulish did red on the canvas. Red, it's a red paint. I could do that. So art, there's a lot of things to art. A lot of it is authenticity. Art is about authenticity. I shared recently, I don't know where I shared this. I shared recently in some sort of context. One of the leading Nazis, who was it? One of the leading Nazis was an avid art collector. If I'm not mistaken, Hitler Yamach Shemai was also an avid art collector, art collector. And then this is Goebbels, yeah. He was an art collector. And after the war, so when they put him on trial, so they obviously confiscated the art collection, and they went after whoever had sold him the art also, because they were also like, I don't know, they got money from it was all part of a network. So he had gotten what is it, Vermeer? Is that Vermeer?
That's
A Dutch
master.
Yeah, Vermeer. So he had bought a Vermeer for like a lot of money. And they went after the Dutch dealer that sold him the Vermeer. And they threw him in jail. And they were going to put him on trial and come down hard. Nazi collaborator, the whole thing. This is after the war. So he says to them, he says to the police investigators, whatever it is, I need to come clean, I need to confess. It's not a Vermeer. I forged it. I'm a forger. I'm an art dealer, but I'm a forger. They said, we don't believe you. You're just trying to get out of it. He's like, I need, what did he say? I need, is it morphine and alcohol? He needed like some, like drugs, heavy drugs in the system, and paint. He says, bring it to my cell, bring me a canvas, paint, and whatever drugs he used to take to do this. And he painted whatever it was. He painted a masterpiece. So they believed him, because like he did it. And when they told Goebbels, he said something along the lines of, now I've seen evil in this world or something. He was so offended. He was so offended by him being ripped off by this guy. By deception and by this horrible person who dared to deceive him and take his money. He was all offended. Anyway, the irony there is thick. But the point is, why is it? Why is it? If it looks identical, why do we care? We care. We absolutely care. The original is worth millions, and the forgery, it's perfect, it's exact. It doesn't make a difference. It's not authentic. There's an authenticity that people crave. We crave authenticity. I don't even know why I'm saying all this. I think I'm saying all this because in Tiferet, it's all about a harmonious blending of colors to create beauty. Beauty, Tiferet means beauty, it means harmony. Beauty is a product of harmony. By the way, you know, they say that when they study people's perception of beauty, what makes a face, let's say, beautiful, is symmetry. That's what they say, right? Symmetry creates the impression of beauty. Symmetry is harmony. Harmony, things are in the right place. Things are balanced. Things are, the eyes, the nose, the mouth, the ears. I don't know, I'm just saying face, body parts at this point. Face parts. But right, everything's harmonious. Everything's in the right proportion. It's the harmony that creates the beauty. So let's get back inside. This is day number 3. Let's continue to explore day 3. So let's start again. The sphere of Tiferet represents the harmonious blending of various colors and forms, producing a work of great beauty. The word Tiferet is derived from the Hebrew word pe'er. Tiferet is pe'er because the middle 3 letters of Tiferet are Pe Aleph Resh, pe'er, meaning beauty. The attribute of Tiferet blends Chesed and Gvura so that a proper mixture of the two can produce a bearable revelation of Chesed to finite created beings. In other words, Tiferet is the attribute which merges the benevolent flow of Chesed and the restrictive severity of Gevura so that each creature will receive its proper measure of divine light and life force. This is why Tiferet is also called compassion or mercy, for it enables Chesed and Gevura to balance each other so that God's benevolence can be absorbed by the limited world without it ceasing to exist. On the 3rd day of, so that's all Tiferet. That's all a deep dive into Tiferet. Harmony, beauty, balance. It's all about balancing Chesed. Chesed is infinite revelation. Gvura is limitation. How do we balance? Meaning, it's almost like in the act of teaching, which is the example I gave before, Chesed would be, I'm going to dump everything on you. Gvura is, I'm going to cut that down. I'm going to do a big division between what I know and what I'm going to tell you. Tiferet is where you give a little bit more even maybe than what you think that they can handle, meaning you're giving something that is also marked a little bit more by the Chesed. Let's continue. On the 3rd day of creation, water and land were separated, and so just to explain, water was separated also on day 2, but that was higher water from lower water. On day 3, water and land were separated, meaning the water which was covering the earth separated out into oceans and lakes and rivers and streams, so that to produce dry land, basically the waters were gathered into one place, and that's how we have cruises on those places, so that it's not the whole thing is a water world. Remember that movie, Waterworld? Mm-hmm. Yeah, still could happen. Let's continue. So the water and land were separated, and the vegetable kingdom was created. The 3rd day, related to the 3rd most elevated sefirot, Tiferet, sets a balance between water and land so that the vegetable kingdom, and thus the animal and human kingdoms also, can be sustained by both of them, each plant according to its need. And I love this. Basically, the idea of balancing water and land, that happens on day 3. You have land and you have water, right? What we know as the beach, right? You have land, you have water. Just enough land, just enough water, hopefully not too much of one or the other, to produce, to sustain life. And that is the balance of Tiferet. You have the Chesed, which is the water. You have the Gvura, which in this case I guess would be the dry land. And you have a balance of the two so that life can exist. Life can exist with this interplay between water and land. That is day number 3. Makes sense? Day 3, balance. Day 4, Netzach and Hod. Day 4 and 5, Netzach and Hod.
And this is about water. It also represents Torah.
Yes.
As well. And what is land? Does land represent anything?
Land in this context, I think, would represent the idea of that which does not have water. Meaning, when you separate the water out, then now the land is devoid. The land might be arid. The land might be it's evocative, I think, of this Gevura. It doesn't have. But the goal is that you draw from the water to the dry land. There's enough of a balance where there's irrigation, there's enough lakes and streams, rivers, oceans, whatever, that life is now sustainable kind of in both, right? You have life is sustainable in the ocean, life is sustainable in rivers, life is sustainable on land because of that balance, that harmonious balance. But one would lean toward the Chesed, and I guess the land, that's the water, and the land would lean toward the Gevura.
Because we need water for life, but we can't live in it.
Yeah, as of right now, without our amphibious things. By the way, they also have these tours. I have to explore this if they have this in, let me see, because I'm going to Chicago next weekend. Oh, by the way, I should mention, next weekend, I will be out of town. There's a father-son Shabbat in Chicago. I was going to say this at the end of the class, so I'll be, I'll be traveling. I'm looking for something to do with Shalom, with my son, on Friday in Chicago. So, someone said yesterday, in Boston, some cities they have this this thing that goes like in the river, and then on the land.
Like a
Duck tour,
Yeah.
duck tours. I don't know if they have it in Chicago, but
They have, it's good in Chicago, they have an architectural tour.
the boat tour. But he did that. So my wife went 2 years ago to visit him. I think he did it then, but I haven't been on it. So maybe I'll drag him again.
So Rabbi, have
Yes.
you been to the Spertus Museum?
What is that?
The Spertus Museum, it's down near the Hilton on the south side.
I don't know. No, probably not.
The Jewish museum.
Oh,
that's
interesting.
Been there and has a lot of volumes that they have preserved for people to come and do research. And they have a lot of artifacts of Jews in the Chicago area, the Midwest.
Oh, that's very cool. I'll take a look at that. We have a long day. Friday's a long day. We can get in a few things. Maybe a boat and a museum. That might be cool. All right, good. Thank you. That's great.
The bus tours are always the hop on, hop off bus thing.
Yeah.
I was like, the Americans don't seem to like them as much as the
great.
Europeans.
The hop on, hop off bus?
They're the best.
It just shows you everything.
You just go around.
They just go around. If you want to hop off, you hop off, you hop back on.
And you get back on, you just pay one
That's
fee,
it.
and you can go around.
Like a double-decker situation or not? Yeah.
Yeah, roofless at the top usually.
Nice.
You know,
Yeah.
Okay.
And you get it takes you all the highlights.
All right. This is great. Who needs to buy the Fodder's Guide? Fodder's, was that a thing?
Yeah.
And they have commentary if you want to put on that.
Right. they have
Nice.
those. It's fantastic.
Americans don't seem to.
I had an idea. Tell me if you guys like this idea. Start a company called Fake Tours. Right? Oh no. Oh no, we lost the feed.
For a second.
I think we lost internet. Yeah.
Fake tours is called a movie set.
No, but listen to this. Fake tours would be, you would get a bunch of like really funny comedians, like improv guys, and they would just do like a fake tour of a city. Just make up stuff. That way you can do it more than once because
It's always
it's always new. Like a real tour, how many times you can do a real tour? Once. You found out who lived there, that's it. But a fake tour, you could do infinite amounts of times. All right, what I'm going to do here is, give me a second. I'm glad this happened by a sidebar. What I'm assuming happened was that the power went out.
Recording in progress.
And we're back. Look at that. We are back. Power went out, and it flicked for a second, which means that I think the router dropped, but I'm back now. Let me check in with you guys. Can you all hear me? All right. Fantastic. Good. I think the message of that is less schmoozing and more Kabbalah. Let's get back to the Kabbalah. All right. So let's do, 1 second. Let's do day 4 and 5, Netzach and Hod. Okay, give me a second here, and let's reset our text. Okay, Netzach and Hod. Whereas Chesed and Gevura signify unbounded loving kindness and its constriction, so that finite creatures can receive according to their ability, Netzach and Hod are the two sefirot, which define the ability of the recipient to receive. Interesting. That line is interesting. These are the two sefirot that define the ability of the recipient to receive. In addition, they perform together as the joint distribution committee, which decide how and in what measure each recipient will get its due. Let's give an analogy. A professor wants to teach a student calculus, let us say. Of course, the professor wants to teach his students as much as possible in the shortest possible time, so that the students can go on to other subjects in math. This is the attribute of chesed. The desire to give more and more is the attribute of chesed. But the professor is well aware that his students' present level of understanding is insufficient to grasp the entire theory of calculus in a single lesson. So he divides up the subject into several lectures, explaining only one section of the theory at a time. This is the attribute of Gevura, limiting and dividing the outflow of benevolence, chesed. When the professor actually explains the subject, he takes into account the individual abilities and limitations of each of his students, and he explains the subject accordingly. This signifies the functioning of the attributes of Netzach and Hod. So Netzach and Hod is saying over here. Now, listen, I've explained Netzach and Hod many times in slightly different ways, but this is the way we're sticking with this for today vis-a-vis the 6/7 days of creation. So Netzach and Hod in this context means that when you're actually delivering the outflow of whatever it is, whether it's information or love or whatever, then you're taking into account at that moment the individual abilities and limitations of the recipient. Let's continue. On the fourth day, what happened? The sun and the moon and the stars were created. Light was too infinite and sublime to be of use to the finite worlds. Thus, on the fourth day, a finite, usable form of light was apportioned. On the fifth day, birds and sea creatures were created, the first recipients of God's benevolence, and the first created beings able to fulfill the commandment, Peru Uravu, be fruitful and multiply. According to Kabbalah, the powers of prophecy and divine inspiration derive from the sefirot of Netzach and Hod, for they actually receive the effusion of godly light. Those are the ones that actually receive. So Netzach and Hod are moving away from the theory of transference and more to the practice of transference, of actually giving, bestowing, transmitting the blessing forward. Okay, and so therefore you have this manifest on day 4 in the creation of the sun and moon and stars, which are actually giving light in a functional way, as opposed to the light of day 1, which we said was infinite, and then even the separation of day 2 is just separating the waters, and then separating the land and the water. All of that is kind of setting the stage, but day 4 is actually delivering the light in the form of the sun, and day 5 is actually creating creatures that can be the recipient of the blessing and really the power of being fruitful and multiply, i.e. tapping into this infinite energy of Hashem in a finite way. Why do I say infinite energy? Because the idea of procreation is conceptually to keep on generating and spawning more and more and more ad infinitum. I mean, theoretically there's no end, because if you can produce something that can produce something else, then there's no limit to that. So the power of procreation is really a power of the infinite, but it's in a measured form, which is a kind of a cool a way to think about a very cool construct. Also, another thing that I was thinking just now is, it's almost like maybe the difference between kind of day 1 and day 4 with the light and the sun. It's like, imagine you have a house that's, new construction, new neighborhood, new building, whatever it is, and it's wired with, let's say, internet. It's wired with like the internet. They run the lines and they pull it into the building and it's wired. Yeah, but you don't have a modem, you don't have a router, you don't have the actual tools to access it. So it's almost like day 4, now you have a sun, you have a moon, you have stars. Now you have the hardware almost, you have like the tools to access the actual light that's going to be on your level. I've told this story many times where one time my internet was a little bit wonky, and at that point we had Comcast. The Comcast guy comes out and he says, the issue is you're getting too much signal. You're getting too much internet. I'm like, this sounds like a scam. Like you just want to limit my internet. I'm paying for whatever amounts of gigs. And no, he's like, no, legit. Like it's just coming in for whatever reason. It's coming in too hot. And because of that, it's overloading whatever. So we got to put a, whatever it is, a transformer, a damper, something to kind of cut it down to be able to deliver exactly what you need in a way that is, so that's like a gvur thing. But anyway, I was saying this vis-a-vis, you might have the pathways connected, but you still need additional pieces in order to make it work. All right, let's continue with day number 6. Day number 6 is going to be Yesod. All right, that is the 6th energy and the 6th day. Just as the sefirot of Tiferet harmonizes and balances Chesed and Gvura, so too Yesod harmonizes, shouldn't be harmonized, harmonizes and balances Netzach and Hod. However, there is an additional aspect, unique aspect of Yesod, in that it acts as the channel through which Malchut, which is the 7th energy, receives its proper measure of light and life force. Whereas Netzach and Hod distribute the divine efflux and determine the character and the amount the recipients receive. Yesod, so meaning Netzach and Hod are almost like the sliders on your mixer, but the bottom line is Yesod is the actual distribution point. Thus, Yesod functions as the connector between all of the sefirot which precede it and the recipient Malchut which is below it. In order,
So much of what I've read, the Yesod is the foundation. It really
Yes.
is the one that,
it's the connector.
yeah.
In a physical sense, by the way, mapped onto the human body, because we're mapping it now onto the days of the week, but you can map these energies onto the body.
Yes.
Yesod is
Yes.
the reproductive organs.
And it's
The space of
one
connection.
that can capture all the divine energy and
Correct.
disperse it for good or be a bit leaky and not do so.
Or for not, exactly. So let's continue. In order for the distribution. So that's the beautiful thing about Kabbalah that I'm sure everyone has noticed and picked up on over the years, is that, Kabbalah speaks of concepts, but of course it uses words to explain the concepts. But once you understand the concept behind the word, you recognize that this is true for Friday, it's true for the human body, it's true. Yesod is a concept, not just a word, that can apply in many different realms. Let's continue. In order for the distribution to reach its intended destination, there must be a proper channel of communication between the giver Yesod and the receiver Malchut. The distributor Yesod, and by the way, in Kabbalah, Yesod is the end of the masculine and Malchut is the feminine. The distributor Yesod must be able to identify the recipient Malchut in order to apportion content to its intended recipient. This is why Yesod is also called Emet, truth, in Kabbalah. Yesod makes sure that the light and life force is delivered to the proper destination. But the identification process does not only mean that the recipient fulfills the necessary conditions that must be met in order for it to be able to receive. Much more than this, there must be an internal bond between Yesod and Malchut, a bond of love and understanding. Yesod arouses the desire to receive from within Malchut, and Malchut in turn arouses within Yesod the desire to give. In this way, Yesod unites with Malchut in complete empathy, so that the giving is direct, face-to-face, and indirect, back-to-back, as it were. Meaning that Yesod proves to be a very valuable idea, a very valuable space. By the way, if we wanted to get back to the realm, because it's going to continue in this direction, but if we wanted to go back to the kind of the space that we have been discussing this until now, which is the idea of, let's say, of education, using that example, Yesod would be the space in which the teacher is not just delivering a lesson, but where the teacher connects with the student so that the student wants to learn from the teacher. The student wants to be there, wants to show up, wants to do the work. A good teacher gets the students inspired to want to learn. There's two different things. You can have a brilliant professor who has brilliant ideas and drops them on people. Fantastic. That's not a teacher. That's a brilliant person talking. A real teacher is someone who inspires the students to open up and want to receive. That's a different art. The art of opening up the recipient. And by the way, a good student. So that's a teacher helping form a good student. And you know what a good student does? A student who's open to receiving, you know what that does to the teacher? You want to teach that student. You want to give them everything you got. So it works both ways. You as the teacher, and again, I'm using a teacher, you can talk about this in relationships and love and etc. There's a lot of different ways that we can take this, but again, sticking with the educational paradigm and example, it all makes sense. Yesod is the ability of the giver to open up the receiver to be receptive. It's almost to create the receptivity within the receiver. Now you're saying, well, why do I have to create the receptivity? Well, that's the way it works. So in the Talmud, it talks about a great sage. His name was Rabbah. Rabbah really means teacher, but he was that wasn't his given name, but he was known. He was the great teacher of the time. And the Talmud says, the Gemara says, that Rabbah before he began teaching Torah, he would open with a joke. And then the hearts of the students would be open, and then he would teach. And Kabbalah asked the question, why the joke? What kind of business is this? You're distracting them with a joke? No. You're opening them up. You need to open up. You can't bomb people with things. If they're closed, it's not going to hit. It's not going to penetrate, and it's not going to be integrated within them. Especially when we're talking about Torah. Torah is not wisdom or information. Torah is about living a certain way. Torah is about it's about transforming us and the deepest of levels. And so, when we think about the role of the teacher, or more accurately in Hebrew, it would be the mashpia. Mashpia makabel. Mashpia means the benefactor or the giver. Makabel means the recipient. The role of the mashpia is not just to give. It's to create a receptivity within the recipient. It's to plant, it's to open up the recipient to allow them to be open to then receive. And a good recipient opens up the giver to want to give. It works both ways. All right, that's all about Yesod. Let's get back into the way it's framed over here, and we'll read the last two paragraphs of day 6. This is going to be on the page that begins thus. It's our last page. No, it's not. Thus, Yesod can be defined as the divine attribute which binds God to his creation in a bond of empathy and love. This is why the sefirot of Yesod is also called tzaddik, saint. Saint sounds a little bit different than what we usually... Tzaddik, or righteous, I guess. As in the verse, a tzaddik Yesod Olam. A saint is the foundation, Yesod, same word, of the world. A tzaddik or saint arouses mankind to seek God. Meaning awakens within the recipient the desire to want to receive God. At the same time, he draws down God's compassion and goodness into the world. Thus, he is the foundation, Yesod, of the world. Yesod means literally foundation. On the sixth day of creation, now let's talk about how it manifests in the actual day of creation. On the sixth day of creation, the animal kingdom was created, including, interesting way of phrasing it, the first man and woman, Adam and Eve, created in the divine image. Not the animal kingdom, but Adam and Eve were created also in the divine image. Both animals and man are told, be fruitful and multiply, which also means to use God's benevolent kindness to grow and expand in God consciousness. Be fruitful and multiply is not just biologically, but it also means to grow and expand in our consciousness of the divine. But an additional duty is given to man, meaning to human beings. Be fruitful and multiply and rule over the animals and birds and the fish. In other words, be over and above them, not among them. Transcend your limited nature. Transcend that part of yourself which is simply natural, like the animal world, and become the divine image in which you were created. The drive to do this is initiated by the power of Yesod, the tzaddik, which is the ability to open up and want more and want that connection. Which takes us to day number 7, and let's do day 7, and then we're going to close out today. Day 7, Malchut. The 10th or the 7th of the emotional, the 10th and final Sefirah is called Malchut. Malchut contains two completely opposite qualities. And this is going to lead us into, not next week, but the week after, in our next session, chapter 6. We're up to chapter 6 of our book, which talks about these ideas. So Malchut contains two completely opposite qualities, called, on the one hand, hitnasut, which means exaltedness, and its opposite, which is shiflut, which means humility. So Malchut has two qualities. It is exaltedness, zugezunt, and is humility. Which one is it? Is it up or is it down? It's both. In the explanation of the sphere of Keter, we noted, and we don't have that here in this excerpt, we noted that Keter, the beginning, is wedged in Malchut, the end. Beginning and end are always connected. It's like a circle, it comes full circle. The reverse is also true. Malchut The end is wedged in Keter, the beginning. We explained that this means that the final product, Malchut, is the original intention of the entire process of emanation. When Malchut is still contained in the original intention, that is in Keter, it is in a state of exaltedness. And when it descends to its place as the last of the sefirot, it is in a state of humility. However, it is not that Malchut is in one state or the other, rather it is in both states simultaneously. It is both exalted and humble. It is both the highest and the lowest simultaneously. On the one hand, let's continue, Malchut receives all that it has from the other sefirot and is described in Kabbalah as les la mergame klum, having nothing of her own, like the moon. Malchut is likened to the moon, doesn't have its own light. Whatever you see, when you see the moon illuminated, you know what that is? The sunlight reflecting off it. And in fact, because it has no light, if it thought it had its own light, it would say, I don't need the sun's light. Get out of here, I got my own. And you know what would happen? It would be a dark orb in the sky. But because it's truly humble, it says, I have no light of my own. Therefore, I'm okay reflecting a light greater than myself or beyond myself. That's why it's illuminated. So that's its humility. Let's continue. And that's what Malchut is. Malchut is an energy that has no light of its own. On the other hand, middle of that paragraph, on the other hand, Malchut is the final revelation of the divine light for which the entire process began. It was for the purpose of Malchut that all the sefirot were emanated. Thus Malchut is both the receiver and the consummation of giving, meaning it's both the lowest and the whole point of the whole thing, meaning the highest. Let's continue. In the explanation of Keter, we said that the great depths of water hidden under the earth, the Tehom Rabbah, symbolize Keter. The wellspring from which flows a small quantity of pure water symbolize Chachma, and a broad and mighty river which begins from its source in the wellspring of Chachma symbolize Bina. So you have the well, you have the stream, and then you have the river. So you have Keter, Chachma, Bina. Malchut signifies the sea into which the river flows. So again, spring, stream, river, sea. Keter, Chachma, Bina, Malchut. It is the actualization, the sea, of the entire revelation which began as a single tiny point of trickling water. Whereas Chachma is the potential to be, Malchut is the actual being, the final manifestation, the original intention. It is for this reason that Malchut is also called Shechina, the divine indwelling presence, the imminent revelation of God, and so the sea returns to the Tehom Rabbah as the final, that's the depths of the water, as the final revelation fulfills the original purpose. Let's bring this back, let's bring this home with what happened on day number 7. The 7th day of creation, the Shabbat day, is therefore a cessation of work. God does not work. The sages say, he who works prior to the Shabbat will eat on the Shabbat. If you want food on Shabbat, you had to have cooked it before Shabbat. That is to say that all the 6 days of creation which precede the Shabbat must do their work if the culmination of creation is to be revealed on the Shabbat day. The Zohar states, each day does its work. Kol Yama Avid Avidita. That's the original Zohar quote. Each day does its work. By fulfilling its function, each day's purpose is consummated. The Zohar expresses this perfectly, stating, from the Shabbat day, all other days become blessed. And this is probably something that we all know, that Shabbat blesses the rest, the week to follow. Right? From Shabbat, all other days become blessed. This applies both retroactively and proactively. The Torah states at the completion of creation, and the work was complete, and God blessed the 7th day and sanctified it. On this phrase, the Zohar declares, the supernal crown, Keter Elyon, is the crown of kingdom, Keter Malchut. Higher Keter is connected with lower Keter, with Malchut. The most elevated of the sefirot Keter is thus linked to the most earthly Malchut, and thus the circle is complete. And I will say this, that on a physical, practical level, it's the day of Shabbat, the day of rest, that is the culmination of the work. Think about it. Think about it in our own lives, how we view it the same way. How we view all of the investment we make, all of the work that we do for that time when we can step back and say, I've done it. I've completed it. And that moment of when the energy that you've expended almost comes back to you in the sense of nachas, the sense of pride, the sense of joy. Look, I've done it. I've completed it. It's finished. It's perfect. It's beautiful. That's what Shabbat is. Shabbat is the rest that comes not at the end as much as it is coming back to the beginning. What you wanted in the beginning is now manifest in real life. Simple example is you want to build a house. Great, that's your original vision. When is it fulfilled? When you actually have a house that's built. When you can step into the house and it's done. In other words, when the work is completed, that's when your original intention is done. It's Shabbat, the end of the line, that really goes back to the beginning of why you started the project in the first place. No one ever said, I want to build a house to build. So I don't want it to finish. I want to keep on building. Maybe someone said that. I can't say no one said that, but that would sound a little weird. Meaning, what do you want? You want it done. You don't want it being worked on. You want it to be finished. I've never heard anybody say, wow, the construction or the project is, a year past its original thing. This is great. And we're over budget. It's fantastic. No one ever said that. Subcontractors said that. They never said that. Why did they never say that? Because who would want that? Who would ever say, I want this to be kept on being worked on? I don't want it to be worked on. I want it done. And so, not that God wants it done and finished, and He wants to, wash His hands from this, this operation. But what we're really saying is that there's something about the humility of Malchut. Malchut doesn't have anything of its own. Malchut is receiving what was given to it. Malchut is the culmination of all of the efforts. The end is not something that's being done, it's something that was done to arrive at the end. When you finish, when you knock in the mezuzah to your front door, and that's the last thing. Now you're ready to live in it. You put up the mezuzah. You're ready to go, baby. That is now, the moment of being finished is the culmination of all of the other things, all of the activities that you've done over the last who knows how long. From the original vision, to the original sketches, to approving the sketches, to digging a hole, to putting stuff in, foundation in, blah, 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 all the stuff that had to happen. Now it's done. Malchut is when it's done. It's the beneficiary of everything that was before it, but at the same time, it is the key. It is the key that goes back to the beginning. And that is what happens on day 7. Day 7 is a rest, but it's not just rest. It's the exaltation. It's the joy. It's the beauty. It's the completion of all of the investment that was put in. When God says, "Look at the world that I've made," and that is the energy that shines on Shabbat.
In a previous talk, you were talking about how we speak of opposite of chesed. It doesn't come from within. It's more leadership.
Yeah.
So how does that fit in with completion and Shabbat?
Good. We're going to get back to that when we resume inside over here. We're going to tie it back in. But you're asking a very good question. I'll repeat it. You're asking in our text, in our book, which again today we went outside of the book to read another explanation of the 7 days of creation and the different energies. But we explained previously that Malchut is a sefirah that is marked by being stirred by something outside of itself. It's not a self-generated energy, it's an other-generated energy. But you're right, but it's still somewhat consistent with this, because Malchut is not something that's happening as much as it's being happened to. Meaning, it's the culmination of efforts that are happening outside of itself. Now that's above it, but we've been talking about Malchut as receiving from what's beneath it. But again, we'll blend that back together next time. We put out the colors on the thing, and I remember watching, what was his name? Happy Trees? Bob Ross. And you put down the color, and then you wet your brush, and then you blend it. So we have now almost 2 colors. Will the real Malchut please stand up? We're going to be blending. We're blending hues and making that beautiful Pacific Northwest, where this warrior of the U.S. Army, he was a soldier, I think, or somehow involved in the military, and he needed to zen out. He needed to relax, so he went to the Pacific Northwest and took up painting. And he is Bob Ross, the epic Bob Ross. All right, so that concludes today. So today we had one objective. The objective was to go through the week, to go through the energies of each week. Your Sunday is marked by Chesed. Your Monday, by the way, everyone's like, oh, Monday's terrible. Guess what? Monday is a day of harshness, separation. Monday's a tough day. Spiritually, Monday's a tough day. Monday is Gvura. Gvura means, no, Kavur means saying no. Kavur means you have this infinite light, you have this infinite energy, symbolized by the water that's, boundless and endless. And God says, we're dividing the water. Infinite water, finite water. We're drawing a line. Mondays are tough. Tuesdays, again, blessings resume. Right? The Talmud says, if you want something good to happen, schedule it for Tuesday. Right? Tuesday is a good day. Then you have Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, creation of the human being, the Yisod energy, and then of course Shabbat, the day of rest. It's up to us to tap into it. The energy might be right around us, but if we don't tap into it, we can let it slip between our fingers. And the best analogy that I can give with that is, right now in this room, and wherever you are, if you're on Zoom, wherever you are, and right now, right here, there are radio stations playing music. How do I know this? If I had a tuner and I tuned it to the right frequency, we would hear pop or rock, or maybe even Beethoven, classical, sports talk radio, analysis of the World Cup. Whatever you would want to hear, you could channel, you can tune into it if you tune into it. The energies, the frequencies are there. The question is, are you and I attuned to those frequencies? My goal today was to at least tell you what the frequencies, what the stations are. But now it's up to you and me to make the choice. Will we tune into the energy of Sunday? Will we tune into it on Monday? And even if we're distracted during the week, at least on Shabbat, do we give ourselves the space, the physical space, the context, to be able to stop and reflect and appreciate the malchut that is around us and flowing through us. And when we do this, we will live more connected, uplifted, and purposeful lives. And let us say, Amen. Thank you for joining me today for Kabbalah Café. As a reminder, I mentioned it before, but just in case you missed it, I don't know how you could, I will be, please God, away next weekend in Chicago doing, thank you very much, Mariana, doing, apparently, a boat, a museum, and a bus.
Yes.
Can it be done? Stay tuned 2 weeks from today as I report back the adventures of Chicago. So that is that. Oh, I have a great idea. We'll take the bus to the boat, from the boat to the museum. Bada bing, bada boom. What could possibly go wrong? The last time I was in Chicago 2 years ago. I've shared this before, but it was funny. It's funny for me. I drove my kids into downtown. It's a beautiful downtown. And we drive over one of the bridges, and the river is all green. I'm like, this is gross. It was St. Patrick's Day weekend. I had no idea that they, first of all, I didn't know it was St. Patrick's Day weekend, but I didn't know that they did that. So I'm like, right, apparently, I was clueless. So I'm like, they got to take better care of their waterways. Like, who pollutes the river like this? This is crazy. I was like, no, bro, it's there intentionally.
Temperature responds great.
Yeah. Well, that's all right. We're not touching that. But yeah. All right, good.
This is why people get married on Tuesday.
On Tuesday is a day of blessing. Tuesday is Tiferet, beauty and harmony. Tuesday is a day of joining together with different things. Tuesday is a great day for a wedding. I was born, I think, on a Tuesday. That's neither here nor there. Although, no, I'm kidding. But yeah, Tuesday's great. By the way, if Monday's your day, and that's also okay. That's also fine. This is not knock. Every day is a spiritual day. Every day is a spiritual. You know what, Scott? We've been leaving it lately. Yeah. That's fine. So you can leave it now. Also, it's good. Yeah. But thank you. All right, we're good. Thank you very much. Hold on one second. Let me close out officially. Great to see you, Dr. Maxey, Matt, Frank, Alexa. Great to see you, Mariana. Great to see you, and Natan. Great to see you as well. Shavua Tov. What do we have coming up? Anything interesting? Tomorrow we have our lunch class, 11:30. Taste and Torah Club. What else do we have? We have our calendar, first ever calendar that we're doing. If you want to be part of it, you can join on the website. We're having our first ever gala dinner. Save the date, August 31st. More details to come very, very soon. And we also have more fun stuff. All right, we'll talk about it another time. Okay, good to see you guys. Have a wonderful week. Shavua Tov.